Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to get started here in just a couple of minutes. We'll wait for some more people to enter the room, but thanks so much for coming and make yourself at home. Again, thank you so much for those of you just joining us. We're going to get started here in just a couple of minutes. So hang tight. We're just waiting for a few more people to come into the room. Thank you again for joining us. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started here. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in tonight to Women in Tech, Then and Now. My name is Amy Ellison, and I'm the exhibition curator at the Los Altos History Museum. We are thrilled that you can join us this evening for Women in Tech. This webinar is being recorded, so if you want to watch it again, or if you want to pass it along to a friend who wasn't able to attend tonight, the recording will be made available on our website. So you can see this webinar, and you can see other recordings of previous programs that we've offered this year. We are so excited to be able to offer this virtual event in connection with our current exhibition, Rise Up, the Fight for Women's Suffrage, which celebrates the centennial of the 19th Amendment and honors the women who fought for women's rights and for voting rights both before 1920 and after. Suffragists paved the way for women to enter the polls, which was then a male-dominated space. And tonight we're going to hear from a group of women who are paving the way in another area that is male-dominated, which is the tech industry of Silicon Valley. Due to the shelter in place, the museum is currently closed to the public. However, we do have an outdoor version of the Rise Up exhibit displayed on the porch of our historic house. So we hope you'll be able to check that out, and we really look forward to being able to open our doors safely to you hopefully soon. The museum is able to offer free exhibitions like Rise Up and free programs like this webinar because of our members and donors. So if you would like to become a museum member, please visit our website at losaltoshistory.org and learn about all the perks and benefits that come when you are a member of the museum. So before I introduce our first speaker, let me briefly just go over the structure of the event tonight. So first, we're going to hear a presentation from Nomi Trapnell, who I will introduce in just a moment, about the history of women in tech and where we're at today. And following that, we will begin our panel discussion, and we'll hear from an amazing group of women who are currently in the field, and they'll share with us a little about their experience and about some of the obstacles that they have faced. So please be aware that our panelists are speaking in their personal capacities only. They are not speaking on behalf of their companies, either present or past. We will allow time after the discussion for a Q&A period. So I do want to encourage everybody to go ahead and use that Q&A feature down at the bottom of your screen. Please write in your questions, write in your comments throughout the talk tonight. There's no need to wait until the very end. Go ahead and write them as you think of them. And we look forward to hearing from you, and we will answer as many questions as we can tonight at the end of the program. So without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker tonight. Nomi Trapnell was a female pioneer in the computer field. She started as a programmer at Lockheed and controlled data, and advanced to product development and management at key computer companies. At IBM Siemens ROLM, she was vice president of product development, and at HP Compaq Tandem, she was a product manager. During her career, Nomi received numerous awards, including the Tribute to Women in Industry Award. Since retiring from HP in 2007, Nomi has focused on community volunteering. She's currently a Los Altos Historical Commissioner and a docent at the Computer History Museum. She was also past president of the Los Altos History Museum. In recognition of her local community work, Nomi was awarded the 2013 Los Altos Hills Volunteer Award. Nomi graduated from Hofstra University in political science and from San Jose State University in mathematics, and she holds an experienced management certificate from Northeastern University Graduate School of Business. Nomi immigrated from El Salvador as a child and is fluent in Spanish. She is married to Fritz Trapnell, who is also a pioneer in the computer field. So welcome, Nomi. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Amy. So as Amy said, I'm going to cover just a few women. There were hundreds that we could cover, but we have only so much time. So I'm focusing only on 4 women. They all made great contributions, seminal contributions. And then we'll see where we are today, which unfortunately is not as good as we hope. So the first woman I'm talking about is Ada Lovelace. As you can see, she was active in the 1800s, and you have to ask yourself, why in the 1800s? There were no computers, no electricity, but actually there were, at least in the design. She, to start with, was the daughter of the poet, the English poet, Lord Byron, but her mother divorced Lord Byron when she was born, when Ada was born, and she didn't want Ada to be anything like her father, who had a very strange, immoral life. So she got mathematicians to tutor Ada, and consequently, she became a gifted mathematician, to the point where, if you've heard the name Charles Babbage, he was a polymath. He was an inventor, a professor, an author, and he designed the analytic engine, which was in all senses a computer. It was never built, but it has all the aspects of computers. He met Ada when she was only 16 and was impressed, and asked Ada to write a scientific paper describing the analytic engine. Well, she wrote 3 times what the original notes were, and this paper, of course, was put into the archives and was published. In the paper,
Nomi, I'm so
yes.
sorry to disturb you. Can you advance your slides?
I am doing it. I thought, are we still on the,
I am only seeing the first slide. If I'm the only one, I'll be quiet, but.
Nomi, I'm seeing your Ada Lovelace slide.
Okay, pardon me. Pardon me.
okay. Let's go on. In the paper that was published in the scientific journal, Ada pointed out that computers should be able to handle more than just numbers. So letters, text, musical notes, nobody had thought of that before her. So in the 1940s, 100 years later, when Alan Turing and other early computer designers studied her paper, she realized that she had a computer program, an algorithm in her paper, and they called her the world's first programmer. Now, she had also predicted in her paper that computers would not be able to think like humans. The humans would work with computers. And we now have heard about artificial intelligence. So she sort of was predicting that. And Alan Turing disagreed with Ada and wrote a test. He called it a test to handle Ada Lovelace's objection. And if a computer can pass that Turing test, he said, then they will be able to think. Now, so far, to my knowledge, no computer has passed the test yet. So her prediction holds right now. Okay, let's go on to the next woman, Grace Hopper. And as you can see, she was more in the 20th century. Grace was a computer scientist. She was one of the first women to get a PhD in math. And she joined the Navy and became a US Admiral. she worked on the early computers in the 1940s. Specifically, she worked on the Harvard Mark I. There were two computers, the ENIAC and the Mark I, that were humongous things. The ENIAC was as big as a house. This one was 50 feet long. Anyway, the designers of these two early of the ENIAC said, you know, if the Navy and Army can use computers, commercial companies should be able to do it. So they started a company, which became the UNIVAC company. It was a big computer company in the 50s and 60s. And they were smart. They took the women with them, including Grace and others who worked on the ENIAC. So what Grace said is, you know, working in computers is a pits. You have to use machine code. So she came up with the idea of a higher level language. This particular one was called COBOL, to where people could then program in something that approached English, and it'd be easier to train people to be programmers. Now, at the same time, there was another language, Fortran, that was used for scientific applications. So when I started programming, I actually programmed in machine language and then in Fortran. But the important thing is she made sure that standards were developed for these languages, so that if somebody wrote a program in one computer, it would run on another computer, usually with minor changes. She's known as Amazing Grace. She's invented a lot of words that are attributed to her. The bug one comes from the fact that the Mark I stopped working. She went in there to investigate and found this giant moth in the hardware. So she pasted the bug on her logbook and said it was a bug. And that's what we say ever since. She did a lot of visits to schools. In fact, I think my sister-in-law may be listening in. She was a high school teacher and invited Grace to come to her class, which she did. And what Grace would often do is she would show a 1-foot piece of wire. And she would say, you know, it takes a nanosecond for electricity to travel this distance. And the reason she was doing that, because she was trying to make the point that if you want computers to be faster, they have to be smaller. You can see her on YouTube, she's a kick. She's gotten multiple awards, including Obama gave her the presidential medal after she had died, unfortunately. There is a Grace Hopper Day that is run by the Anita Borg Institute, and they help a lot of women to be successful in tech. Now, the next two women I'm going to talk about are more contemporary. They're still alive, for one thing, and Adele Goldberg and Lynn Conway. And these two women actually worked at a company called Xerox PARC, Palo Alto Research Center, which was founded in 1970 right here in Palo Alto. In fact, they were located, the first office building, right next door to where I worked at Control Data, right off of Page Mill Road. And they set about to hire the best engineers, hence Adele and Lynn. Now, there may be somebody listening to the webinar who was one of the best engineers at Xerox PARC. That's Ed Taft. He is also a former president of the Los Altos History Museum. So Ed knew these two women. What happened at Xerox PARC was amazing. There were so many innovations that we now just take for granted. Lynn was known because she was in charge of the hardware, and she developed something called VLSI, very large scale integration. She wrote a book about it, and she provided software and tools, because when these chips had so many transistors on them that it was no longer possible for somebody to design them and check them out on paper. You needed software and software tools. She taught classes in VLSI at hundreds of universities and provided a computer base for them the engineers to check out their chips. So very important contribution. The Alto, which was the computer at Xerox PARC, used, of course, these chips. They did a lot of things at Xerox PARC, graphical user interfaces. The Alto used the mouse for point and click, drag and drop, windows, and no one had used that before. The mouse was actually developed at SRI, but they brought the engineers and the mouse with them when they joined the company. Then WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. That was new. You could type something. The screen was like that, looked like a piece of paper, 8.5 by 11 shape, and you could print exactly what you had on the screen. This was amazing. I'm here to tell you that I was using octal numbers and cryptic commands to talk to a computer about the same time. So the other thing they did at Xerox PARC was a laser printer, which we all have laser printers today and are hooked to our little computers. And they tried to get Xerox to adopt laser printing, but Xerox back east in New York said, oh, no, we have good printers, they're selling well, we don't want to change anything. So instead, laser printers became popular or popularized by other companies like HP, who made a lot of money out of it. So the other thing they did, which was new, it was more like, not quite like a personal computer, but everybody got one, engineers and administrators. And so they needed a way to communicate computer to computer. So they came up with the Ethernet local area network, one of the engineers there and others. And this allowed them to send email or mail to each other in files. And the important thing is that this became Ethernet the basis for the internet technology we all use today. Very important. Now, it came about that Apple made an investment in Xerox. So they wanted to see, well, what does Xerox have in this little company in Palo Alto? So an engineer you may have heard of that worked at Apple, Steve Jobs, decided to come over and see a demo. Well, Adele was put in charge of the demo. And, oh, I should say that she was also in charge of a team, or worked on a team that did Smalltalk, which was such a simple language that even children could use it. So Adele gets told to do this demo for Steve Jobs, and it's called the infamous Alto demo. She at first didn't show him everything, but Steve went back to Apple and talked to one of the engineers who had worked at Xerox PARC, and he said, they didn't show you everything they have. So he appealed to Xerox back east, and Adele was told to show him everything. And consequently, the Macintosh came out and used many of these wonderful user interfaces. And it formed the basis really for personal computers, because obviously you didn't have to be an engineer anymore to use a computer. So it was very important. Now, we're going to talk and see what's happened since then. At the time of the 60s and 70s, I have read that as many as half of the computer people were women. And I can attest to the fact that when I worked at Control Data, there were a ton of women working there. So what happened? This chart shows the different Silicon Valley companies. On the bottom, you see Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Google, Microsoft, and it shows the percentage of women in the workforce at tech companies. So the blue is the total number of women in the workforce. And then important for us, the aqua is the number of tech jobs held by women. And as you can see, it's not great, it's in the 20s. Microsoft only 20%. So that's the problem we're trying to solve. If you have most of the civilian workforce being women, we should have more women in tech. So why do we think it's a good idea to have more women in tech? Well, it's been forecast, I haven't seen the final numbers, but in 2020, that only 29% of US computer jobs can be filled by US computer science tech grads. So we are importing basically computer science graduates from other countries, and they are being trained here. Many go back to their countries instead of using, the rest of our population. So why is it important to have women in tech? A lot of reasons. Obviously, customer needs. A lot of customers, by the way, are women. So if you can understand customer needs better, you can have better products. If you have a diverse population, as we do in the US, varied products make sense. And it's been shown that companies that have more women tend to be more profitable. The other thing that I think a lot of times people think that tech is just a, one person working underneath the desk by themselves, but we know that complex, important products require teamwork, and women are very good at teamwork. And why not fill the US high-paying jobs with our own people? Now, why are there so few women in tech? There's been a study that ran surveys, and they listed all the different reasons they believe. One is called the degree gap. And as you can see, in 1985 or thereabouts, 37% of computer science degrees were earned by women. This kept dropping, and in 2016, it was down to 18, and today it's probably more like 16 or 15. Why did it drop? Nobody knows the exact answer. It's believed that somehow it was felt that programming or computers were, kind of individual, nerdy, geeky things, and there weren't too many women interested in that. So that's why we've seen the drop. Now, the retention gap is another cause. It's also called the leaky pipeline. So computer science majors, say if you think 100 degrees were obtained by women, only 38% are still in the job when they ran this, this survey in 2019. Same thing for engineering majors. Women, only 24% of all the degrees still working. The other one is the culture gap, as they call it. Women were asked, have you experienced discrimination at work? And 50% of them said yes, and much fewer men thought that they had experienced discrimination. Then the other issue is the pay gap. So women in tech, as women in other fields, don't earn as much as men. 80% of what men earn. As you can see, women believe that's true. 42% men think, no, women are doing just fine. The other gap is a leadership gap. If they ask the women, are you likely to be promoted to executive management in your company? Only 25% of the women said yes, and 54% of the men said yes. So women cite a lack of support in the company, a lack of self-confidence, a lack of mentorship, and feeling that they have to prove themselves to be better than men to get promoted. And we can talk about this in the panel, but this certainly happened to me. I would only get a juicy job when all the other men had it, failed to do the job, and they finally said, well, let's let her try. And so instead of saying, oh, this is a great job, it's a plum job, let's give it to a woman, it only sometimes happens as a last resort. Now, unfortunately, the pandemic is not helping. So now that everybody's working from home, a lot of women are considering leaving the workforce. So women with children, as much as 17%, and then women with children under 10 years, as high as 27%. We have somebody in the panel who can speak to this. But companies can rise to this moment. And this is more opinion of Sheryl Sandberg of Lean In and Facebook. She says, you have to reset goals and extend deadlines in this pandemic, and also not expect people to work 24/7, which is unfortunately the way things have gone, even when I was still working. Because you would get calls in the middle of the night, you were dealing with India, Japan, and other time frames. The other thing she says is focus on the accomplishments, not how many hours people work. And since everybody's going to be working from home, make sure that work from home works for all employees. and help the women who have to do other duties. And retaining women and keeping gender diversity is critical, as we saw before. So how can we do it? How can we encourage more women to enter the tech fields? Mentorship programs, universities in the industry are trying this, and we have a panel member who can talk to this. For example, at Berkeley and Stanford, they found that when women or girls came in for computer science, they needed more introduction, some of them. They hadn't had necessarily the AP courses in high school. So what they've done is to have introductory courses and even boot camp in summer before they actually start. They have had good results. Computer science and EE degrees earned by women have tripled at Stanford to 31%. And to 22%, they've doubled at Berkeley. This is a couple of years old, but still going in the right direction. There are many programs to encourage women in STEM, STEM being science, technology, engineering, and math. So there's a outfit called Women in STEM. There's the Grace Hopper celebration of women in computer, Girls Who Code. There's any number of these programs, again, with the same objective. One of the problems, as I said before, is that women's accomplishments have essentially not been documented. They've been erased. And Wikipedia is doing now, and it's quite almost complete, pages on women in computing by decade. So they go, who did what in the 1700 and 1710 and so on. They're worked up almost to the 2020 now. So we have to close the gaps. We have to make sure that the pay is proper, that the culture supports women, that women are put in leadership jobs. Okay, I'm going to now turn this over to Julia Lovin for the panel discussion. She is the moderator, and you can see that we have some very interesting panel members. They will introduce themselves. Julia?
Hello, everyone. I'm having a little trouble with my camera. I'll work on it in just a minute. But thank you very much, Nomi. That was wonderful. And I am delighted to be here this evening as the moderator for this fabulous and distinguished panel. You are in for a treat. We have people with such varied backgrounds and expertise. We have programmers, lawyers, data analysts, CEOs, and product managers. There's a wide variety of jobs available in technology, and I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, including where they work and what they studied in college, and I will kick it off. I've been in technology my entire career. I've worked in the engineering departments at companies large and small, from Hewlett-Packard and Juniper Networks to Prism and Druva. I'm currently a senior vice president with the digital and innovation team at Wells Fargo. And if you're asking yourself, what does technology have to do with banking? Well, consider whether you have ever accessed your checking account or mortgage account or credit card account online. You may have logged in to check a balance or pay bills. If you've done that, my department was helping you. So there's technology in many, many industries these days, and it's likely going to stay that way. I attended school locally at Santa Clara University. I have an undergraduate degree in math with a computer science minor and a master's in engineering management. I'm going to ask Meg if she'll introduce herself now.
Sure. Hi, my name is Meg Desko. My current job is as a lead software engineer at a company called BigCommerce. BigCommerce is an e-commerce platform that allows people to start stores quickly online. As part of my job, I sort of like head engineering efforts for a team that works on product pricing on storefronts and in cart, and also collaborate with other teams. My undergraduate degrees are in chemistry and German, and I have a PhD in chemistry from Stanford.
Thank you, Meg. Diane.
Hello, my name is Diane Gabl Kratz. I graduated from Cornell University with a degree in physics, and then I went to law school at University of Chicago. Immediately afterward, I started my legal career here in Silicon Valley. I started in private practice at some large corporate law firms, and later on went in-house to a Fortune 500 company as senior intellectual property counsel.
Thank you. Thank you. Saroj.
Hi, my name is Saroj Pathak. I came to this country in early 70s to do my master's degree in electrical engineering from UC Berkeley and haven't moved out since then. So I've been here almost like 50 years. My first job was at AMI. That company doesn't exist anymore. And the first time I applied for a job, my boss could not believe that Saroj would be a girl's name. So he had to drive all the way over to Berkeley to see if I was real. So anyways, after that, I did work at Intel and was very fortunate to work in the booming times of Silicon Valley and hardware and non-volatile memories and so on. So after Intel, it was a big push in startups. I worked for Cypress for a long time. And after Cypress went public, I was planning to be retired. I retired for a few months till the kids said, Mom, you need to go to work. So I went back to work and I worked at Admiral for another 10 years. I was director of new non-volatile products. We did research, design, manufacturing, production, all of that. After Admiral, I really truly retired. I wanted to do something more meaningful. So my son and I, we started this company, Explorabox. Our mission is to provide the love of science to young kids. We believe that the younger the kid is exposed to science activities and get more comfortable with it, it's not going to be hard anymore. And that's one way to promote more science to not just girls, but to boys also. So we do, and it's all local. We run seminars, we have hands-on science activity kids, we go to schools, we do various different things. So that's where I am.
Thank you. Thank you. Nomi, would you like to share anything else?
Well, you've already heard about me. Do you want me to share how I got into programming?
Yeah, sure.
So I was still in school, went to work at Lockheed, and I had math. So they said, would you like to learn how to program? And I said, yes. And I said, what's programming? But it turned out to be something I really liked. It was so fun. I was doing orbit analysis applications using, as I said, Fortran and machine language. After that, I said, I better go work for computer companies because that's what I really love.
Thank
That's
you.
it.
Shawne.
Hi, I'm Shawne Van Deusen-Jeffries. I'm a business operations senior manager at Juniper Networks. Juniper makes hardware and software which powers the networks of our customers, including the internet. If you've bought stock on the New York Stock Exchange, if you are obviously all on the internet, probably through one of the major service providers, all of those companies use Juniper Networks products inside of their networks. So your little bits are processing through our equipment. To support this, I analyze internal business data and I create visualizations using SQL and Tableau software to help other people understand the messages hidden in data. Both my bachelor's from Occidental College down in Los Angeles and my master's degree from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign are in chemistry. And Nomi, I actually started my career at Xerox, but not Xerox PARC.
Oh.
Well, thank you all very much. I think it's pretty interesting that we all ended up somewhere in high tech, but didn't necessarily study. We all studied some kind of science, except for Saroj, who had electrical engineering. But Diane, how did you end up in a working for high tech?
Well, actually, after law school, I really wanted to be in a beautiful environment. So California was very appealing to me. I came out here for the hiking and the mountain biking and the proximity to wine country. The technology just sort of happened to be a side effect, but of course it turned out that it was a really wonderful choice. And because of my background in physics, I was able to leverage that into an intellectual property legal career here. As an in-house intellectual property attorney, my job is to help technology companies to develop their inventions and to capture and protect them. So that can mean collaborating with engineers and product development teams, overseeing invention review boards, deciding what to patent or what could be protected perhaps as a trade secret, and then obtain those kinds of protections for the technology.
All right. Meg, how did you go from a PhD in chemistry from Stanford to being a lead engineer at a software company?
Well, if I'm honest, it was all an accident. So I finished my PhD in 2009, which was when the U.S. economy was in free fall. I spent some time teaching at a women's university abroad. I came back, I looked for a job, had trouble finding one. A friend of mine said that I could be his temporary office manager until he hired his real one. And that was sort of my first step into tech. So then after that, I started looking at tech companies that were doing sciencey things. And I found a small company called QuestGen that did clinical research data management. They hired me as a project manager. And then I think I was there 2 months and I was asking if we needed to score a test for one of the studies we were doing. And my boss said, do you want to learn how to do it yourself? So they handed me a PHP the Easy Way book. And that was sort of the beginning of being a software engineer.
All right, that's great. Shawne, what's your favorite thing about working in a technical field or about your job?
The thing that I think I like best and I've always really enjoyed is solving a challenging problem. I really hate to be bored, and tech lets you solve problems. That's the whole crux, the whole basis of technology is I have a problem, I have tools. How do I solve my problem using my tools? And I'm competitive, and tech lets me compete against the tech. I don't have to compete against people, I compete against the tech. So that's really what I enjoy.
I think I hear that a lot, that people who go into tech like solving problems, and that technology, there's always a lot of them. But not all of technology is fun either. And I think, Diane, you had a story about what you like least about being in technology.
Gosh, well, I think I might tell a different one. But one thing I just wanted to share that is very frustrating is not getting the presumption of competence. I remember back when I was at Cornell University, people used to ask me what my major was. Everyone would always ask each other. And when I said physics, I would get this wide-eyed stare, and people would say, gee, you're not what I thought you'd look like, or you don't look like a physics major. So I would just ask, well, what do you think a physics major is supposed to look like? And then usually they had nothing to say. So I think that the assumption that you're not technical, or the assumption that you're not fit to be a leader because maybe you're a woman, or you're short, or you have a quiet voice, or you're young, that's what's very, very frustrating to me. And a corollary to that is when these assumptions are made not only by perhaps men who have a more privileged background, but by women themselves, especially women in power. Women in power can do a lot of damage to other women's careers when they're not supporting women.
Yeah, that's very, very true, very interesting. I think probably all of us have been in a case of mistaken identity at some point or another. I want to talk just for a minute about families and about some of the things that are very, very specific to women in the workforce. I just recently learned that Congress passed a law in October of 1978 that made it illegal to fire a woman because she became pregnant. Until then, it was perfectly okay to fire someone if she became pregnant. That was a grounds for dismissal. Now, Nomi, I know you were working before 1978, and I know that you had children, and I know that you kept your job. How did you do that?
I was lucky to work for a company that had a big division in Silicon Valley, but the headquarters were in Minneapolis. So they had a rule, the headquarters personnel, that you had to quit at 6 months if you were pregnant. I said, why, does my brain turn to jello or what happens? So they wouldn't budge. So I asked my doctor to give me a note that put my due date, 4 months later. So I continued working. My local management, of course, knew I was pregnant, but they didn't report it in. So I continued to work until the end. And then when my due date came, Minneapolis called my secretary, answered and said, this is the day that Nomi has to go, the baby, 6 months. And my secretary said, well, Nomi had her baby. Nomi's in a business trip right now and she can't go on maternity leave. Goodbye. That was it.
Saroj, you had something to share as well.
Yeah, I have a fun story to share. Actually, it's kind of negates the stereotype women discrimination. I was working at Intel and I was pregnant. That was my first baby. I was working on a very critical product that we were supposed to, you design it and you tape it out and goes out for manufacturing and comes back for testing. So it just so happened that work week 40 was when the design was complete and we taped it out and I cleaned up my office and went back home. And it was Friday, and that weekend my daughter was born. And it's like 2 days later, my boss called and he said, so how are you doing and stuff? And he said, oh, so the product is coming out in a few days and can you come to test it? And it was like, at that point, I don't think he understood that it was illegal to do that. I had no idea. So I said, well, okay, I'll come on one condition, that I have to bring the baby with me. And if you take care of the baby, I will come. So I brought the baby, and when I walked in the building, there was this huge banner across Intel building, all across Intel building, welcome baby Pathak, and congratulations Hindi honey. It was just so fun, so refreshing. So this bunch of young engineers were working with me, and they had just done this. And of course, my boss held the baby, I did the testing and stuff, and it was just a lot of fun. So, high-tech people do have hearts a lot of times.
All right, that's great. Meg, I know you just had a baby a year ago. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, this was my second baby. When I was pretty early in the pregnancy, I told my manager, just so that, if I was out for any appointments or needed to work from home or anything, they would be aware. He said, take the time you need. Your family is the most important thing. And, let me know if there's anything I can do. Things went, things just pretty much went normally. I went on a business trip to Australia, sort of like right around the midpoint of my pregnancy. That was like right when I started showing, which was kind of funny because like at the beginning of the week, I looked like one person. At the end of the week, I was visibly pregnant, and somebody walks up and goes, "Oh, congratulations," which was pretty funny. But I think we're very lucky in the state of California in that we have pretty substantial parental leave dictated by the state. So what's pretty common is for women to go out 4 weeks before their due date on, basically on a disability leave which I found helpful because I was hardly sleeping at that point. And then there's 6 weeks of disability leave, and then 6, and now it's 8 weeks of parental leave. So that overrode anything that my company had in place, and my company is based in Texas, so the benefits there aren't quite as generous as California. So I've felt very fortunate to live in a state where there is a lot of attention paid to that. And then I went back, and people were impressed that I hit the ground running, but I felt, as the only female lead engineer, that I didn't really have a choice. So I just did it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm actually filling in right now for someone who's on paternity leave. So it's a good thing for men as well. I know Nomi's presentation talked a lot about mentorship, and I wanted to hear if you've been a mentor or if you've had a mentor. Shawne, can you tell us?
Yes, I've been fortunate to be both. I've had throughout my career, not consistently, I've had a few mentors throughout my career who have really helped, and I can tell the difference in my career cycle when I've had a good mentor, when I've really enjoyed that mentoring experience, and when I haven't. I've also had the privilege, thanks to you actually, Julia, to mentor with a program called Tech Women. And I've been doing that since 2013. And that is a State Department sponsored program that brings women in technology from 22 countries in Asia and Africa here to Silicon Valley for mentorship. And that has been immensely rewarding. Because as a mentor, you're giving and you're supposed to be giving, but the truth is that as a mentor, you learn, and so I get back tons from the people that I have mentored. So that has been quite the privilege.
Meg, how about you? I know you're also in the Tech Women program.
Yeah, I am in the Tech Women program, and I've mentored women through that since 2012, and that's been probably one of the more rewarding things about being in the tech industry is like I get to see the industry through their eyes, like through the eyes of these women who are seeing it for the first time, and it sort of reminds me of how lucky we are to be here. So I've been a mentor. I've also had mentors. One of them is on this is our delightful questioner, Julia. So there was a time when I was looking for a new job, and we'd talked about it, and I was really hung up on wanting to make $100,000. Like this, I had a very specific number in mind, and the company offered me 85,000. And I talked with Julia, and she said, well, you just tell them that you want to feel good about starting. And part of feeling good is feeling like you're being paid what you're worth. So I went in and I said that. And, after that, the VP, who was the hiring manager, he said, well, what do you think you should make? And I very flippantly said, I want $96,000 because then it's evenly divisible by 12. I have no idea what possessed me in that moment, but then they came back with an offer at 95. So it's really, helpful to have mentors. And I also have a mentor at work who has decided that he is my sponsor, and has declared himself available whenever I decide I want to go for the next promotion, which is also pretty incredible. So I've been very lucky in both being a mentor and having mentors myself.
Another thing, Nomi talked about Sheryl Sandberg and about keeping women in and some of the things companies can do to help during the pandemic. But when I read Sheryl's book, Lean In, and for those who don't know, Sheryl Sandberg is the chief operating officer at Facebook. when I read Lean In, one of the things that I read that struck me the most is she said the most important career decision you will ever make is who you choose as your life partner. And I, anyone have anything they'd like to say? Diane?
Yes, absolutely. I have the most wonderful husband, and he is so helpful. So really any career accomplishments I'm able to make are largely because of him. He gets up earlier than I do. He makes sandwiches for me to take to work back when we actually had a workplace to go to. He scoops kitty litter. He fixes everything. He's incredibly helpful and incredibly hardworking. And not having all of those extra chores kind of weighing me down frees me up to be able to do a lot more than I would otherwise be able to do. So I am super grateful. I'm very glad that I was careful in making that kind of a choice.
Smart. It's great to hear. Great to hear. Um, we've talked some about what it's like to have high-tech careers here in the Silicon Valley, but Saroj, you also worked internationally and have managed teams, global teams. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can talk about India. I don't know the details, intimate details of other country, but I know, a lot of people in India, so I can really talk about that. But whatever I say, just remember India is, over 1 billion people. So whatever generalization people make, there's always a counter to that. So I'll just share one story. Just recently, when I was in India, like probably 3 years ago, I visited an old college friend. He's a successful business person doing really well and lives with his son, daughter-in-law, and 2 grandkids. So we were just talking and he introduced his daughter-in-law very proudly. She is the gold medalist in genetics from Delhi University. Just so proud of her and just wonderful. And I was really impressed. So I asked her, oh, so where do you work? And she just very softly said, I don't. And so later, as I talked to her privately, I got to know her a little bit more and we talked. And this is the typical story in India. Generally, you're allowed, as a girl, you're allowed to study whatever you want within certain bounds. You just can go to college, do whatever. But the whole purpose is, and I'm not judging, I'm not saying go to bed, but the whole purpose of it is family's happiness. And the woman will get married. I mean, it's given that as a young person, you would get married. And once you're married, then your whole life is dedicated to the family. And in her case, it was more like taking care of the kids, the in-laws, husband was working. So she said in the beginning, she tried to work. She was allowed to work. But then when the kids came, it was just very hard. And she took it upon herself. She said it was very hard for me to manage the kids, provide for the in-laws and husband, and do a justice for my job. So I decided to quit. And that's kind of, a story how women in India are dealt. So.
Okay. One of the things that I think several folks have talked about is the fact that women do things maybe a little bit differently than men do at work, and sometimes that's appreciated, and sometimes it's not appreciated. And Meg, I think you had an interesting story, and Nomi, I think you did too. So, Meg, could you?
Sure. So one example that comes to mind is that last year I was put up for promotion to lead engineer, or no, 2 years ago. Oh my goodness. I think the pandemic ate the time. So I was put up for promotion to lead engineer, and there were a lot of objections to it. And a lot of the feedback was that I didn't have opinions and I wasn't speaking up and I wasn't making myself known. And when I looked at the team I was on, I was in meetings with very opinionated men who would shout over me, in a very literal sense in the meeting. So a few things happened after that. So one was I worked with my mentor on a plan to show that I was the subject matter expert for my area. And so we planned to write a lot of documentation and do a lot of blog posts and start working on collaborations with other teams to show that. And there was also a staff engineer who sat in on that promotions meeting. And he was the staff engineer who worked with the team I used to be on. And he said, I can do something about this. So he actually started stepping in and saying, no, let Meg finish. No, let this person finish. So it ended up that, it benefited me as a woman on the team who was getting spoken over, but it also benefited, some of the men who worked in a remote office who would get talked over because they were on the phone and everybody else was in the same room. So I think that the combination of those two things really changed the situation. And when I went up for promotion 6 months later, the person who objected the most just sat there and said, I have no objections. And here I am today.
That's great. That's great. Nomi. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, I don't know if I have one that specifically fits that, but I did make a comment that when a job is very good, plum job, good pay, it's hard for women to get considered, In my case, whenever I got a big promotion, it was because a project was in the tank. I mean, big time. And they had tried several men to do it, and they finally said, well, let's try Nomi, what can we lose? And of course, I did do it and I got promoted. Part of the thing is that when a project is in real trouble, and I'm talking about big ones now, not 5-person, but big ones, the people working on it know what's wrong, but nobody has talked to them, but really talked to them, not just, hi, Joe, how you doing? And that's what I would do. The first thing I would do is meet with everybody on the project. And they would, basically, they tell me what was wrong and what they thought should be done, and I do it. So listening is one of the things I think women are better at than men. And so they're good in teams, teamwork, that sort of thing.
And almost everything we do now is part of a team. We have a question from the audience about, do you feel that it is an advantage to promote yourself as a woman, or do you try to when you're applying for a job or some kind of submitting a paper or something, would you use like your initial and your last name as opposed to, Diane Kratz? Would you say D Kratz instead? How important or significant do you think it is to talk about being a woman?
Well, one thing I would say is I don't think it helps us as much as we wish it would. At least in my career, I do not believe it has been very helpful. As a matter of fact, I can think of some very specific examples where I believe it did hurt me for a variety of reasons. So what I've been doing in terms of trying to cultivate my professional career is trying to focus very heavily on the technical expertise. For example, I do significant speaking at conferences throughout the United States on intellectual property issues, and I've guest lectured at Stanford and Berkeley's Haas School of Business. And I try to select topics that are actually very technical: patent portfolio management, technology transactions, best practices for IP litigation, those sorts of topics. It's wonderful to be here speaking with other women about women's issues, but I don't want my speaking roster to be, 85% women's issues and 15% technical expertise. I'm kind of going for the opposite. And I think that actually is very important, so that people think of me as, oh, she had this really great recommendation on foreign filing, as opposed to, oh, there's that woman who's all, waving the diversity banner, trying to promote herself in that regard.
Interesting. Anyone else have anything that they would like to add?
Yeah, I
to
like
that?
to say there are studies done where they took identical resumes and switched the name to a woman's name or Asian person's name or typical white male's name. And the responses were dramatically, even just getting the call for the interview, were dramatically different between a woman and a man. And the same thing is true for promotions and salaries. So there is data out there saying that having a woman's name does hurt. It doesn't help. But once you are in the business, once you're in the career, then people know you. So then it doesn't matter.
So Julia, I'd like to add something to that, and I would say that
Please.
in today's world with social media, in when I started, and in the beginning of my career, you would send in a paper resume, and Shawne is kind of a mixed name, and especially without the hyphenated last name. But in today's world, there's almost no way to hide the gender, because everything's electronic. Most people are on LinkedIn, and I think that the thing that we can do as women in technology is to actively recruit women, to look for women in technological fields. So this is it may not be an advantage, but there's a lot of networking. We can use our networks to help other women. So that's what I would say, is that we really need to do that.
Yeah, someone once said that a lot of women in technical fields are very, very used to being the only woman in the room or one of the only women in the room. And what you want with a network is to realize how many rooms there actually are, and then get the women out of the rooms and to talk to each other and support each other, and be able to experience the power of that. I'd like to ask folks if they have any kind of advice that they wish they could give to their younger selves that might be interesting for people in the audience that are starting in their careers or something like that.
Well, one piece of advice
go
I
ahead.
think is important is look for allies, mentors, people to support you. Look everywhere. Don't just limit yourself to other women or maybe to people who have a certain background, because some of the best people, the most supportive, maybe aren't necessarily who you think that they're going to be. And the flip side to that, of course, is do not assume that a woman in power is going to help you. She may actively be trying to sabotage women. I've actually seen that happen in a number of different contexts where policies are put in place that systematically are harming women for promotions and other kinds of topics. So, look for a great leader regardless. It doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman.
Wasn't it, I think it was Madeleine Albright that said there was a special place in hell for women that didn't help other women. That's the anyone else have advice that they'd like to give their younger selves? Very interesting to look for mentors and leaders to follow and study. Shawne?
Julia, so I'd like to say there's a couple of things. One is that we do need to advocate for ourselves. It's not a thing that I did when I was younger. I was fortunate in that I had some lab mates when I was in graduate school that advocated for me in a situation where I wasn't advocating for myself. So one is to advocate for yourself, but the other thing is that, as several of us have seen, a career path is not a direct straight shot. It zigs and it zags, and the thing that you're super excited about today isn't going to might not exist in 5 or 10 years. And so to be open to change and think about skills and ways of thinking, as opposed to I want to be that particular thing in that particular job, because that's liable to change.
Okay. Meg, I think you had something you wanted to jump in with.
Yeah, I probably tell myself not to stress out so much. I would tell myself to basically look for the combination of interesting things to do and nice people, because I feel like if you find the right people to work with, the things you work on become inherently more interesting because of who you're working on them with. And that's, and that's something that I think I've sort of consistently done, although not always consciously. I switched PhD advisors during graduate school because I didn't like the person I was working with, even though I thought the research was fascinating. And instead I went with an advisor who was just a really good human being. And that, I finished my PhD in her lab, and then I just kind of look for, okay, like what's the next most interesting thing I can do, and like, are there good people? And that took me to teach at a women's university in Bangladesh. It took me to working in this little tiny company that no one has ever heard of. It took me to my next job, and then it also brought me where I am now.
Yeah, that's great. Anybody else have advice for their younger?
Yeah, I could add to what everybody said. Pretty much agree with whatever they're saying. But I also think that work hard. I will tell myself, don't listen to other people. Just do what you want to do and work hard at it. But at the same time, promote yourself. That's one thing I didn't do much. And I think we, as women, we tend not to do, but we do need to do that. And naturally, we work as a team. I think as a woman in general, we are very good with our team. So keep that going. Don't let other people tell you that, being too friendly with your coworkers is a bad thing, or your subordinates with a bad thing. It's not. I think women have an instinct to work as a team in general. And that really, long term, it does really pay off in terms of successful products. So I would just say, be yourself, be confident, and work hard. You have to work hard.
Work hard. Nomi, you wanted to jump into.
Yes, I do a lot of work with young women at the Computer History Museum. We have, design code test, and we have special tours for women and for kids. What I think is important, and I tell them this, these tech jobs are very high paying. And somehow women tend to always go to the low paying jobs, and the men take over the high paying jobs, which is why there's so many men in tech. And, it's not, sometimes the girls think, well, I like art, I like painting or whatever. You can find something that's related, but if you get your computer science degree, you can write your own ticket practically. Right now, jobs are going, it's starting jobs for hundreds of thousands of dollars if you have the right computer science. In artificial intelligence, they are killing for computer science grads with artificial intelligence. I want to take a course at Stanford. If I should go back.
Can I add something?
Yeah,
just wanted to add something kind of going off of what Nomi's talking about. I take any opportunity that you can to continue to grow your professional self. So to get additional certifications, to take on big projects. For example, when I was at Morrison Foerster, a fantastic law firm, in my second year, they asked if I wanted to take the patent bar exam. And my first impulse was absolutely not. I just took the regular California bar last summer, and I'd taken a whole bunch of final exams before that, my last year of law school. The last thing I felt like doing was taking another major exam. But Morrison Foerster was fantastic. They encouraged me to do it. And not only did they suggest it, they said, okay, we will pay for your review course. We will give you the time off to study for it and prorate your hours target. And we will give you a bonus if you do it. So that was pretty nice. So I decided, fine, I'll do it. And because of that, I had a credential that later on helped me make my move in-house. And it's basically opened up just a world of different kinds of intellectual property and different kinds of professional opportunities for me.
Very interesting. We have a couple of questions from the audience. One question is about who helped you set your agenda in your life and in your career. Was there anybody influential? Was there anything in particular about that? Anyone want to take that on? If not, I'll tell a little story about I grew up in a small town where women were wives and mothers. It was a religious community, and I had not had a woman teacher in any kind of subject besides social studies and English since I was in the 5th grade. And my senior year, I was in an advanced math class, and this little small woman showed up and taught the class. And she was a widow. I don't think she was trying to be a role model. She was trying to support her family and get through the day. But it was the first time I had had a woman teacher, and I did well in her class. I liked her a great deal, and I went on and studied math in college, and that went from there. Now, she doesn't know she was a role model for me. She, as I said, she was a widow. She had kids. She was just trying to, to go about. So I always tell people, you may be a role model and not know that you're a role model. And so when you're a woman in technology, so make sure that that you're bringing that you have a large wake and are bringing those people along with you. Anybody else? Did that make anyone else think of any stories about people who helped them set?
So
Shawne?
yeah, so I would say the first thing is that there's nobody that I would say specifically directed my career. It looks pretty random. It has flowed. But part of the reason that it has flowed is I have had opportunities. I've had people throughout in different places in my career gave me opportunities. I was, when I was early in my career, I ran an analytical lab. That's what I did when I started my career, and I got bored, and I told the CEO of our little company, I told her that this is really kind of boring, and she said, "Okay, I'm gonna give you this opportunity," and so she gave me a chance to do something different. And that has flowed, and the next time around I had another chance. I had to choose between a job interview and an anniversary trip, and so I was offered an interview, and I said, I really can't make that time. I'm going on vacation for my anniversary, and the hiring manager let me delay the interview till after the anniversary. And so that really led to a significant shift. So I would say those were a couple of opportunities. That hiring manager that let me shift, that was a male hiring manager, and he made a big difference in my career.
That's great. That's great. Diane, I think you had something you wanted to add.
Yes, I wouldn't say that anyone else really directed my career, but my father was a fantastic role model early on. He was the first in his family to go to college, I think maybe even the first to graduate high school. And at the end of the day, he ended up with a PhD in EE, and he did plasma physics, when he was working on his dissertation. So that laid the groundwork and an appreciation for, the importance of hard science, and also getting a degree in something that would actually lead to a job that would pay, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up, becoming a physics major. My older sister became a physics major, and my dad used to help us with our homework a little bit. he likes to joke that he ended up with 3 different physics degrees, his own and one for each of us. But without having a parent like that, I'm not sure that I would have taken that same path.
All right. All right. That's interesting. Thank you all. We have another question from the audience. And this one, it's just how long do you think it will take that we won't be talking about women in tech like it's a big deal? How long before it's just it's not a concern? I was going to say, I think now in the finance world, we're not really talking so much about women in finance. There are women in finance and banking and things, but tech, it's still a big deal. Nomi.
It's going to take a while. And unfortunately, as I showed, the number of women getting things like computer science degrees is going down, and the pandemic isn't helping. But hopefully we can get it back over time to where, if we were like half of the workforce in tech, that would reflect more what it's like, in the world. So a few years, I think.
A few years. Okay. Still a ways. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add on that? Well, it's kind of a good segue. There's another comment from the audience that some countries it's not as big of a deal. They say, for instance, in Israel, being a tech woman isn't a big deal. It's just there. So other countries may have bridged it better than the U.S. has. But next thing I'd like to talk about is what are some ideas that all of you have for bringing more women into tech? And Saroj, I'd like to start with you.
I think it has to start from birth or maybe pre-birth and onwards. There's so much stuff, that unspoken stuff that goes on in the family and as a society. We kind of message our girls to just program them to know that they're not good enough somehow. So that has to change. But then the other thing that we work as Explorabox is early on, if you get the kids and girls and boys get excited about how fun science is, how fun it is, and how much joy you get discovering things, then they learn the words. They may not understand the whole thing, but they know gravity is wonderful. They may not understand gravity, but my 3-year-old grandkid, he runs down the hill shouting, "Gravity is pulling me down." He has no idea what he's talking about, but at least he knows. So just the sprinkling more of a science early on, I think, is the key to get kids more comfortable. Then as they're growing up, they don't think math and physics are hard. I was talking to my daughter-in-law who was born and grown up here, and she was a counselor at Stanford for a long time. And she was saying the difference, and she's traveled a lot with her college counseling programs. And she was saying the difference between India and here is in India, they don't teach, as little kids, they don't teach you as math and science are hard. It's good to be good in math, and it feels really good. You get awards, you get medals and all this stuff. And here from the beginning, girls and boys are just taught that math and physics are hard. So naturally you want to do easy things. Why would you choose to do a hard thing? So I just feel like it has to start from the society, from the beginning, and then things will take care of itself, I think.
Saroj, I know that you have a nonprofit that you're head of that's helping with that. Could you say the name of it again? We've had a couple of people ask.
It's explorabox.org.
Explorabox.
Yeah.
Okay. Other folks on our panelists, what would be your ideas for bringing more women into technology?
I would say that I think it's good to focus on kids and on making math and science not scary from the beginning. But I think there is also, there are also a lot of potential on-ramps, after people have degrees in something else. And I think we don't pay that much attention to it. People can go to boot camps, they can teach themselves how to program. At my company, something that I really like about BigCommerce is that there are a lot of people who come up through the customer support org who then move into engineering or into product management or into documentation writing and other more technical roles. I think there often is a lot of attention paid to like the pipeline at the beginning, but not that much on expanding the pool of potential technologists among people who are already in the workforce.
And I think a lot of community colleges are doing things, or technical schools, to get more people into programming so that you can, learn the basics in a couple of years and get a job that's well paying. And if you love it, you can go on and do more advanced work. But everybody doesn't have to be a designer. You can be a programmer and get things done.
So some maybe some less emphasis on undergraduate degrees or college degrees
College.
in computer science. And I was going to say a good deal of the people on this panel are a pretty good example of folks that were able to do okay. Any other ideas? We've talked about getting kids when they're young, maybe de-emphasizing the importance of a particular degree. Shawne, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think the other thing that we need to consider is once you get into the workforce, some of the things that we can do in the workforce to encourage women to join in technology, and that's not just women. I think anybody that's underrepresented in the field, that this is one of the things we can do. But we talk about we hire people, and if you have a hiring panel that's a whole, that's 6 men or 5 men or 4 men, it doesn't have the same resonance. We need to think about, as we're hiring women, as we're hiring people that are not representative, let's make sure that there are people on those hiring panels that are helping in the decisioning process, so that there is that pull. I think
some companies are doing that. They're insisting that every interview have at least, a woman or a minority.
But I've heard a downside to that, actually, not for the procedure itself, but for the burden that it can place on certain minorities or on women. If you're the only woman or the only person with a certain background in your department, then you're going to be on every single one of those committees and every single one of those interviews. So I've actually read about this, and it can be too much of a burden to have to keep representing people of your background, and to have that much additional administrative kind of work added to your already heavy technical workload. So we have to be careful with that.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Any other ideas for increasing women? So I just we're almost out of time, and we've kind of run through all the audience questions. Thank you very much, audience, for asking questions. But if we were to say very quickly, ask all of our panelists, what's a good reason to go into career in technology? So we're going to start with Meg. What's a good reason, Meg? Why would you tell folks?
I would tell folks that if you love solving problems, you should go into technology. And it's also really great because millions of people can use what you work on, which is pretty cool.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Diane.
I think technology is great in that there are so many growth industries that are in the technical fields. So your chances of having opportunities for promotions or having more job offers, there's a lot going on, and you can actually project down the road that you're going to have other opportunities.
Great. Saroj?
I would say it's fun, it's flexible.
Fun. Yeah.
It is prestigious. It helps you live a respectful life. And on top of that, you get to innovate. You get to do all these wonderful things.
Nomi.
Well, you know, when I went into programming at first, I had been teaching high school and they were paying me twice as much. And I said, it's so much fun. And they're paying me so much more. And I don't have to deal with spitballs and students fighting. Yeah, great pay, fun.
And fun. Shawne?
Yeah, I would echo what Nomi says. I mean, the tech jobs pay significantly more than other types of jobs, and that the self-sufficiency that comes with that, the ability, and I think this pandemic is teaching us that it is possible to do these tech kind of jobs, not necessarily from the office all the time. I mean, this is an advantage. I know that there's a lot of people that have had to go to work through the pandemic because they have to go into the office. I think a lot of the tech jobs, you know, I myself have not been into an office since last March. And I know it's hard, but I'm still doing my job and I'm still getting paid.
All right. All right. Amy, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you, panelists. Really great panel.
Yes, thank you so much to all of you. Julia, thank you for moderating. Nomi, for
My
your
pleasure.
presentation. And to all of our amazing panelists, such amazing stories and unique stories, and really making us think about all the different, the good things about being in tech and the obstacles that we're still facing and how we can overcome those hurdles. So thank you so much for such a thoughtful evening. To all of our attendees, thank you so much for joining in. We hope that you all are well and stay safe. And we hope that we're able to open our doors again soon when it's safe to do so. So until then, we'll see you later. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.